That's horribly premature of you all. Just so you know, I like faith communities because they usually have hope, and so they show up and hope the speaker's good, which is really good. Now, the really quality faith communities have faith that the speaker's good because they have hope in their leaders. So I don't know if we're at a good or a great. So we'll see. It's whether you showed up hopeful or whether you showed up faithful that it was going to be a fantastic morning. So before we start, if I could open us in prayer. Dear Lord, during this festive season, which is also a hard season for some people, we just ask that your presence would be with us, that you would be with me, that you would open my heart, that you would open my mouth, and that you would open our hearts so we can come closer to you and closer to those around us. Amen. So I do work. It's a good start, right? I do work. I work for the Wasteman Center. I direct a small program called the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Health Care Needs. So we have 5 regional centers throughout Wisconsin. One of them is at Wasteman Center. We work with families and providers to try to change the system of care for families who have children with special health care needs. The federal definition of special health care needs is very broad. It's any child birth to 21 who has a condition that may result in extraordinary medical for a year or more, or behavioral or mental health. And so basically, if they're going to receive out of ordinary care for over a year in length, they count as a child with special health care needs. So from autism to cerebral palsy to cancers, those are the families that I get to work with, and I love what I do. Somewhere along the line, though, as much as I tried to convince them that part of helping families live in a mentally healthy way is to teach them about forgiveness, they somehow decided this was not in my work plan. And so I'm taking a vacation day, which thank you all very much. It's been a while since I've been able to sleep this long on a Thursday morning. It was glorious, wake up and hear the pitter-patter of the rain and look out and see the dreariness. And it was just so much different than when I wake up and there's no sunlight. There still was no sunlight, but it was better. And so that is because of you all. And so I thank you for that. So that's a little bit of the background. To clear up, I almost went for Masters of Divinity, but then I started to realize that there was this thing called the internet that was out there. And so they said, hey, would you like to learn Greek? I said, I pretty much can learn Greek by sitting at my computer and saying, what's that word mean? How about that one? And so they said, well, if you don't want to learn Greek, which I was bad in my first foreign language, there was no way I was going to get Greek. I said, no. They said, well, then you probably don't want a master's in divinity. I said, that's fine. I'm not that divine anyway. So much less mastering the divinity. Whoa. No, I'm an amateur in a lot of what I do. So I have a Master's of Arts in Christian Studies. And that goes along with my first master's, which is in psychology. So I'm not a licensed counselor. I do not do counseling yet. I have a pastor at my home church in Stoughton that we're talking about what would it look like for me to do some pastoral counseling. More on that later. We'll see. God hasn't told me yet. And I try not to move ahead too much. Spend a lot of my life doing that. Speaking of my life, can I share a little bit of my background with you? This is where I came from. So, and don't worry, I stumble. It just happens. Anybody else ever stumble? Okay, yeah, okay. We're going to get, anybody fall? Anybody ever fall? We're falling people. Okay, no, we're not gonna preach that this morning. I grew up in an alcoholic household. My dad was a drinker. He was also a church leader. And so I totally adored my father. He taught in a public school system. I went to a parochial school. When we had our religious holidays, I would go to my dad's school. Yeah, more school. I just wanted to be around him. I wanted to be around his world. When he would go for choir practice, he was a fantastic organist, fantastic keyboardist. So I go with him to his choir practices, and then afterwards I go out to the bar with him. This is 5, 7, 8, 9 years old. It's just and y'all look to be a similar age of mine, and so y'all understand that that was no big deal back then. Back in the 60s, early 70s, you took your kids it was no big deal. It wasn't as big a deal these days to have a couple and then get behind the wheel. And we've learned a lot. Not quite quick enough. One of my birthdays is we're heading out to see Fantasia, the original Fantasia. Anybody? Oh my gosh. The show is fantastic. So I was looking forward to the theaters to go see Fantasia. And it was, of course, at night. But on the way to Fantasia, we got into a little rear-end accident. And again, back in the day, we knew very well that my dad had had a few beers before we headed to the theater. So we ended up turning around. So why is that story important? That story is important because years later, when I started to come to grips with how much hatred I had of my dad and how much unforgiveness I had of my dad, part of me said, if only he could acknowledge what he has done. And so I would recount these stories, and I'd let him know. And he didn't remember a thing. He doesn't remember the accident. He doesn't remember taking me to numerous bars. He had no memory of what were pivotal moments in my life. How do you forgive someone that doesn't even remember they hurt you? That was a struggle for me. Oh, and then there was my older brother. John was my dad's from a previous marriage. And so when I was born, he was already really liking my mom. His birth mom was very troubled. She had some troubles. She was having a hard life. And so he really liked my mom. He liked my mom so much that he was horribly jealous that he had to share his mom with me, who was actually my mom, which of course, being the jerk that I am, let him know when I fully realized this. So that's sometimes the way we are. Well, growing up, I used to have the story. You know how your parents tell you stories and your relatives tell you stories about you? So the narrative about me was that I loved my mom so much that I never wanted to let her out of my sight. I always had to be near her. Is that a lovely story? Yeah. So years later, I find out that that's not really the story. The story is that she wouldn't let me out of her sight because she was afraid of what my older brother would do. So I remember a few times of getting beat up. I remember being tied to a tree, just some nasty stuff from my older brother. A lot of resentment, a lot of pain, a lot of anger. I ended up trying my best to not be close to my family. When I had the chance to go away to college, I took it, and I didn't look back. I tried not to see my dad as much as possible. When I had the option to not go over, I didn't go over. When I had the chance to study things in high school, I studied alcoholism because I was not going to be an alcoholic. No way, no how, until I started drinking. So I ended up drinking as well. So that's just a little bit of my background. Why is that important? Because this conversation, this life that I'm trying to lead, is really a life preserver for me. It's what I have to do to be able to live healthy, to be able to live connected to God and connected to the people around me. I needed to learn forgiveness, but I wasn't sure how. And maybe some of you are sitting there going, yep, I know we're supposed to forgive. I realize this, but I just don't know how. We're going to talk about that today. But you have a struggle. The struggle that we all have right now is we have to ask ourselves, do we live in a forgiving or an unforgiving world? I would put out that we live in a world that is driven with revenge, that it's very common to hear lines like, revenge is a dish best served cold. is we are told that our bitterness, our resentment, our anger is supposed to be pushed down, and it's supposed to stew, and we're supposed to just really get a hold of that so that then we can express it at the appropriate time, which is usually when someone hurts us or they tick us off. So we learn to hold on to our anger, hold on to our bitterness. As a matter of fact, I would say that we are now at a point, when I look at the world around me, that it's not even enough that someone has to hurt me before I get mad at them. If they just disrespect me, I am allowed to lash out. And it is my right to hurt them just because they disrespect me. It's my right to hurt them before they hurt me. And that, I think, is the world that we're living in right now. So you say to yourself, okay, Tim, I can understand that. It's a world of revenge. It's a world that's bent on power. Disrespect is rampant, and we're told to hang on to our anger. Matter of fact, we have people that say, my anger fueled me to the heights that I'm at now. And I just want to ask them, well, what are you going to do when you hit those heights? Does the anger just go away? Oh, I got what I wanted. I guess I'm no longer going to be angry. I don't think that happens. I don't think anger goes away that easily. But you may be saying to yourself, Tim, that's all well and good. That's gorgeous. But we're fine church folk, right? We don't deal with anger. We don't deal with bitterness, except when we drive. Maybe there's a little issue when we drive. Maybe good Christians who would not dare say anything wrong inside church have the perfect ability, as they're in their mobile castles dealing with the demonic drivers around them, to perform horrible acts with their hands and their mouths, that they then leave. Oh wait, no, they don't. They wouldn't dare perform these things in church. Wouldn't talk like that in church. Our hands would not make those gestures in church, but behind the wheel in our mobile castles, we are king. And those other people are driving on our roads. And matter of fact, some of them shouldn't even be driving. They shouldn't have a license. I don't know what they're thinking. There's no way. They obviously have blah, 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 blah. We tell ourselves all these things. And then we want to believe that when we pull into the church parking lot and we come into our gathering, that we leave it there. Maybe we even learn to take a cleansing breath. But what I think happens is that we then talk about it with other people. You would not believe that idiot that was on the road today. Oh my gosh. You know, Susan is the worst. As I was trying to pull, hopefully Susan's not here today. As I pulled in, Susan it was obviously my parking spot. Doesn't she know that my ankle's bothering me today? That I needed that closer parking spot? Oh, that's Susan. Or maybe as you go to work or go to volunteer activities, you bring along and you tell those stories about how we've been harmed and how we've been wrong. It's like we're begging the people around us, please affirm that I am surrounded by idiots and that I am not one of them. We want to hold on and share our bitterness and share our anger. Unfortunately, what we've been told doesn't quite go along with that. Ephesians 4 tells us get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander. Hopefully there's no brawling in church. I don't know what kind of church, but hopefully you've kept the brawling to a minimum. Along with every form of malice, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you. 1 Corinthians 5, we learn all about what love is. Love is not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. I find myself a lot being like Paul in Romans. God, why am I doing the things I don't want to do, and I'm not doing the things I know I should do? Why I am not the person that I want to be? I really don't like being bitter. I really don't like being angry. I don't like holding resentments. I didn't enjoy not wanting to visit my dad as much as I didn't want to go see my dad, I really didn't take much pleasure in it. But it seemed like the right thing to do. We hang on to our forgiveness. We hang on to our bitterness. I don't know about you all, but I certainly have kept a record of wrongs in my life. And this has an effect on us. What does it do? Oh my gosh, what does it do? Physically, just imagine right now that that person that you don't like has come and decided to sit right next to you. Okay, so some of you are sitting there going, I need my oxygen, don't do that to me. Because our bodies react. Our muscles will tense up. Our heart will start beating faster. This will just start crunch up a little bit. Could possibly lead to ulcers, can lead to addictions. Our bodies let us know. Mentally, we start to get distracted. We're like, oh, she's right there, he's right there. And we start to think about it. That song comes on the radio and we start to think about them. Holidays are coming up. I don't know if any of you have, it's okay, I already picked on Susan. Bill, any Bills in here? Okay, thank goodness. So let's say that Uncle Bill, Thanksgiving, you know that Uncle Bill and his family are not going to come over for Thanksgiving. They're not welcome. No one knows why. Something happened years ago that Bill and his family are no longer welcome at the family gatherings. And so when we get to the holidays, we start to think about Bill. And we think about his family. And maybe we know why Bill and his family aren't invited. Maybe we've been hurt by Bill. And so the last thing we want to do is share food with Bill. But what if this year Bill says he wants to come over? You're not going to be thinking about the turkey. You're not going to be thinking about the stuffing. You're not going to think about the cake sheet of pumpkin pie layered with whipped cream. You're going to be thinking about Bill. And you're going to think more and more, well, what did Bill do? Why did Bill do that? Oh, Bill did this, Bill did this. And we recite it. And we get distracted mentally with those people that hurt us. Emotionally, it can lead to depression, anger, resentment, bitterness. Relationally, we see a lot of broken relationships. We become distant. We don't trust people. Why? Because we've been hurt. It's a pretty reasonable explanation, but it's not what we're called to. It's not what makes us whole. And then spiritually, when I talk to people about unforgiveness and bitterness, what they say to me is that they thought there would be more to life. This is the life that they thought they'd be living. No one likes to hold on to the bitterness, but if we look around us, it's what we're taught to do. Except when we come to church. When we look at the Bible, it gives us a different way. How do we deal with our bitterness and resentment? How many grew up during the age of Star Trek? The old Star Trek? You and the new Star Trek? Yeah. Okay, so y'all, what happens, and I'll get to younger folk in just a minute, but what happens when the Romulans decloak off the port side? What does the Starship Enterprise do? What's the order? I heard someone say it somewhere out there, a lot of different things, and maybe we have different memories of the show Star Trek. But what I remember is the very first thing Kirk would say, "Wait, shields up. Sir, there's a Romulan uncloaking on the port bow. Shields up." Is the first thing we do is put up our defense shields. Now, when we were younger, we didn't have all of the strength. We didn't have everything that we have today to deal with the world around us. We've learned a lot of different ways to deal with people around us. But when we were little, we didn't. When we were little, we used these defense shields to protect us. And they were needed. But as we grew older, we brought some of these defense shields along with us. And they're not useful anymore. And so we look at defense shields like denial. I hear from people in the church that the denial that I hear is, well, yeah, Bill hurt me, but, I guess that's just my cross to bear. So you're saying it's okay that Bill hurt you? Because I don't think it's okay. I don't think that was right. We put up a shield of blame. Not my fault. It's your fault. This goes all the way back. Adam, what'd you do? It wasn't me, it was her. Eve, what did you do? It wasn't me, it was the snake. Snake, what did you do? Meh. That's how I think it went anyway. Blame is one of those things that when we are hurt, we don't want to deal with the pain. We don't sometimes want to admit that we've been hurt because we want to be strong. We want to be whole. No, you didn't hurt me. That didn't hurt. It either didn't hurt at all, so I deny it, or, well, I'm not really, I didn't do it. You did it. See, this is where I get to go, it's not my fault you don't like being here. Paul invited me. Not my fault. And so we pass the blame on. Why? Because we don't want to deal with the hurt and the pain. Rationalization, well, I guess it was just meant to be. This all leads to isolation. It leads to the fact that we start to live exactly opposite of the way that we're told to live out in the Bible. We are told repeatedly to love one another, have compassion with one another, be kind to one another, just be with one another, worship with one another. We were made for a social life. We were made to be with other people. That's in our DNA. That's how we were made. When we live in resentment, bitterness, and denial, then we start to live apart from people. Just like I started to live apart from my family and apart from my dad. Because it leads to isolations. And it can lead to a double life. It's fun to have a double life if you're Batman. Okay? It's really cool. You get a bat cave, you get cool clothes, you get toys, you get a car. It's awesome. A helicopter, it turns into a boat. It's amazing. But when you're living a double life of everything's fine, everything's great, I love everybody except this person. And no, I'm walking solidly with Christ unless she shows up to Bible study. Not my fault, it's her fault. I don't have to do anything about it. She should change. For you were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Be filled with the Holy Spirit, giving thanks to God the Father for everything, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. That is how we are meant to live. That's our DNA. Bitterness and resentment keeps us from that. This is really fun because I changed the slides last night, and so I have to put on my glasses to see what I wanted to talk about. I can share these slides with you afterwards because I'm not going to go through all the scripture references. I believe you guys will be able to do that yourself. But there's just a few that I wanted to highlight. Bear with each other, forgive one another from Colossians. Matthew, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother and sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. How many sermons have you heard on that one? It's time for giving, or maybe you do online giving. It'd be cool if there was a box. I verify that I am reconciled with everybody before I give. We don't want your money until you are reconciled with your brother. No, you're not going to hear that sermon. But this is the high value that God places on forgiveness. It's a high value that covers all areas of our life. Even our giving back to Him. He's concerned about our relationship with others. If you wanted to, we could talk about Joseph in the Old Testament, one of the best stories of forgiveness. Because Joseph really didn't start out as a righteous man. He started out as a little punk, always poking his brothers. Hey, guess what? You're going to bow down to me. What do you think of that? I think I'm going to kill you. And so they did, but then Joseph opened himself up to God. And Joseph learned forgiveness. And because Joseph learned forgiveness, we could draw a line that we are here today. It's part of our story. We look at the parable of the prodigal son and the prodigal father. Wow, what a picture of forgiveness. How was that father able to forgive? Because he didn't start off bitter. When his son said, "Dad, I wish you were dead. Give me my crap. I want my portion. I want my stuff." The dad didn't sit there and say, "Go to court. If you think you have a legal right to it, we're going to take you to court, and until then you just live out there." No, he said, "Okay, I love you." And then he spent his time waiting for his son to come home, anticipating, hoping, instead of wiping his hands of that ne'er-do-well. He's never going to be welcome in my house again. So we have that biblical examples. And there's more. The word forgive, forgiveness, and forgave, it occurs over 250 times in the Bible. It's central to how we live. It's central to accepting and believing that Christ gave up his life so that we can live. I think about what happens when I choose to do wrong. I have yet to do anything in my life, and I've done some not great things in my life, but I've yet to do anything where God has built up a resentment against me, where God has said, "You're no longer welcome here, Tim." No. He has always opened his arms, his heart, and his church, no matter what we've done. The hard part is he calls us to do the same. All right. So how do we forgive in an unforgiving world? I know a lot of you are sitting there going, "Okay, it's been a half hour build up. We got 15 minutes now to learn." Yep, you're right. It's fine, because of the fact that even if I had weeks and weeks and weeks, I don't have a magic formula. I have a process. I have suggestions. I have things that you can begin to do in your life to open yourself up to forgiveness. And that's what we're going to cover now. But how? We're going to use Dr. Enright's definition. So Dr. Enright founded the International Forgiveness Institute. He is at UW-Madison. He's sometimes called the father of forgiveness therapy. He went out and he decided to study what are the scientific effects of forgiveness. Does it really work? But he also came from a faith background. And so when I was getting ready to finish up my short 10-year journey to my second master's, I tend to procrastinate a little. Yes, it took people 2 years. Okay. I wanted to do something where I melded together the biblical, some of the Bible that we just saw, with the scientific evidence. Is this real? Because I believe that it should match up. Dr. Enright had already been doing a lot of this, so I based a lot of what I was doing on his work. So his definition of forgiveness: when we forgive, we willingly and deliberately offer goodness to those who have been unfair to us. I love this definition because not all the forgiveness models that I studied have anything about offering goodness to those. I believe that a Christian model of forgiveness without sacrifice doesn't make sense to me. I think we need to return good for evil and not continue to return evil for evil. So when we forgive, we willingly. So it is totally your choice. I am not going to be able to browbeat you or convince you or in any sort of way make you forgive. And so those models that I grew up with, little Timmy, yes, we know that John broke your arm. Okay, whatever. But he said he's sorry. So what are you supposed to do? I forgive you. No, it's not willingly. It's not forgiveness. But it's what some of us have been taught. We deliberately offer it. It's an act. We're not going to suddenly wake up and be more forgiving. We're not going to fall into forgiveness. I always think about people that fall into love. I'm like, well, that's just a horrible way to start a relationship. It's an accident. I fell. It's like, no, I'd rather be lifted up into love. And okay, so yeah, no, that makes no sense. But we don't fall into forgiveness. We have to retrain and we have to rethink how we deal with our relationships, especially how we deal with those people we don't want to deal with. These aren't our warm and fuzzy friends we're dealing with. We offer goodness to those who have been unfair to us. So there is a part of what has happened that is unfair, is we have been treated unjustly. If we deny that we have been treated unjustly, we're not going to be able to find forgiveness. Forgiveness and justice are not opposites. They walk hand in hand. Is you can forgive as you seek justice. They are not incompatible. But if we don't recognize that someone has been unjust to us, then we won't realize we need to forgive them. We'll continue to deny, blame, live our double lives, and isolate ourselves from them. So let's break this down. Forgiveness is not just saying, I forgive you. It's not primarily about you. It's not finding excuses. It's not offered inanimate objects, so I'm not going to be able to teach you how to forgive hurricanes. I'm sorry about that. And it's not a quick magic formula you can recite and it works like magic. Trust me, I went through all the Harry Potter books and I could not find a spell for forgiveness. Forgive Rama. It doesn't work. But life-changing does. And for followers of Christ, it's not optional. So science, this is all Dr. Enright's study, reduces depression, anxiety, reduces anger. They studied these things. They had tests before and after. I'm like, this is awesome. And then some things they weren't able to quantitatively study is people said increased quality of life, increased cooperation. So we're back to the fact that we should just forgive. All right. Number one, you have to acknowledge the pain and the junk. Some people are like, okay, you're telling me I got to re-immerse? No, you do not have to re-immerse yourself into the trauma of whoever hurt you. The way that I describe it to people is that we have all grown up, again, back to those defense shields, or I forgot about the younger people in the crowd who don't understand Star Trek and defense shields. Think about Wakanda and the Black Panther and those awesome, so shields come up, right? Somebody pokes us, we're going to put that shield up. So for the younger crowd of y'all, think Wakanda. So we have to recognize that we have these ways that we have already built up to stay safe. And so when I'm saying, we need to look at the pain and the junk, I'm not saying, okay, Dan, I'm just going to go right back into there and it feels like, no, don't do that. But what if we had a safe place and a safe group of people to explore this with, and we'd just look over and we'd see what happened, and we'd see how it affected us, and we could see how maybe our view of the world changed because of what someone did to us. And we start to look at, oh, that's why I don't trust people very much. That's why I don't like going to their house or to that side of the family. Because we can look over and then we can come back. But we need to acknowledge that we've been hurt. We need to look at the junk that we have inside of us. And let me tell you, it helps a lot to focus on one person at a time. When I teach the class, we go through and I give them a grid of who hurt you when. They're like, really, Tim, you want us to go through? Yeah, I want you to go through who hurt because I want you to figure out, where do you want to start forgiving? Because you're not going to forgive the whole group. And so we look at who hurt you, how much would you assign the level of hurt, and how did it change your life? How did it change your point of view? So acknowledge the pain and junk. One of the most important steps is we have to decide our way isn't working. So how do people deal with the bitterness, anger, and the resentment? Well, we already talked about isolation, but this is also where we can get into drinking. We can get into addictions. We can get into eating disorders. We have all sorts of ways to deal with our pain. And a lot of it's not healthy. So we have to decide that the way that we've been dealing with our bitterness and with our anger just is not working. I want to try something else. Okay, great. Consider forgiveness. Okay. I'm convinced 38 minutes ago, I was not convinced that forgiveness was such a thing that I could do, but now, Tim, you convinced me that I should be doing this. Okay, so we're going to consider it. And then there's this point where you come to this choice. And people are like, oh, that's not really a step. I'm like, oh, you tried it? Have you tried to actually sit there and choose that from this day forward, I am going to forgive my father? and I'm going to live like it. So there's that choice to forgive, the decision to forgive. But most important is, as we talk about forgiveness, what we're talking about is rehumanizing somebody that maybe we have demonized. Is for a while, I referred to my dad as the brewery and the smokestack. That's all he did. He drank and he smoked. Why would I want my kids in that environment? Why would I want my kids in that condo with what used to be white walls and that now are yellow? Why would I want to expose them to that? He was a monster in my mind. My brother is a monster in my mind. How many of you think you need to forgive monsters? No. But what if they were really humans? What if what we're dealing with are not monsters, but we're dealing with other people that are hurt, other people that have had pain, other people whose life just didn't go the way that it was supposed to? And we stop looking at them as monsters. Do me a favor, think of somebody that you don't like, not somebody that you horribly dislike, but just somebody that, maybe you don't really care for. You can close your eyes if you want to close your eyes. I want you to imagine that person as a baby. They're freshly born. There they are, crying in the crib, waiting to go under the fry warmer. Have they hurt anyone yet? Have they done anything against you? They're just this little baby needing to love and desiring to be loved. And maybe you can follow, if you know that person, follow them through their life, and maybe you can even find out where it started to go sideways. But when you open your eyes, come back, and you deal with that real life person, that person started as that baby. At what point did they stop being human? At what point did someone say, you are no longer human, you are a monster? Do we have that right to take away their humanity card? The Bible tells us that all people are made in God's image, that we bear his likeness, that we bear God's likeness. And yet, we have decided that people that hurt us, I decide that people that hurt us aren't really in the likeness of God. There's something different. If you ever want to see if you have bitterness against someone, just use some sentences like, I believe all people are made in the likeness of God except for Betty. See how that works. If the Holy Spirit doesn't come and say, what the heck are you doing? I'll be very surprised. So we have to come to this realization that this isn't a monster, that my dad, not a monster. I learned things about my dad, and I learned about his dad, and I started to learn a little bit about, why my dad was so hurt. So one of the things you have to remember is that hurt people hurt people. I know you probably heard that before, but hurt people hurt people. Is those people that are damaging us, those people that are harming us, are not doing it because they are being their optimal selves. It's not because they are living in this warm, fluffy world where everything is happy and going really well for them. We don't generally hurt people when we feel loved and when we feel accepted and when we are doing good in life, when we are living our optimal selves. Chances are we are not going around damaging other people. But when we are hurt, watch out. And it's usually people that are closest that we lash out to. Think of my wife, I think of my kids. If I have a bad day at work, can I yell at my boss? Probably not. But can I yell at my kid for not emptying the dishwasher? Oh yeah. Do you have any idea why today, of all days, I'm mad about the dishwasher, whereas for the last 6 months I didn't care? Whew. If I don't realize that when I am hurt, when I am not living my optimal life, that I have a tendency to hurt people, then I'm not going to notice how I am leaking on them. So we are very leaky people, folks. The Bible tells us that what's inside of us is what comes out of us. Is we leak. So we have a choice whether we are going to leak forgiveness, whether we are going to leak love in our relationships and in our families, or we're going to leak bitterness and resentment. So we realize our own fallibilities. We realize our own struggles. We realize our own hurts. And then we realize that this person is no longer the other. This person is no longer the monster. We rehumanize them. We give them back their likeness of God. And then we can forgive. We can say, this is another fellow human being. Now some of you are like, well, okay, that's great, and I've already partially done some of that, but I still don't want anything to do with them. Okay. There are some people that have hurt us so much that we do need to set up boundaries, and we need to set up rules for safety. Because forgiveness is not becoming a doormat. Forgiveness is not saying, oh, you hurt me once, come on back, hurt me again. No. Again, forgiveness and justice are friends. They go together. But what I am saying is that that person that hurt you, instead of talking incessantly about them, just shut your mouth. Instead of shooting them dirty looks across the church, smile. Instead of ignoring them when they send you a Christmas card, which may be their attempt to reach out, send them the card back. It doesn't have to be all gushy and, oh my gosh, everything's fine. No, it's a process. It'll take time. But it's returning that good in place of the evil. That when we get poked, we return love. When we are harmed, we return love. How can we do that? Because that is what Jesus did. Because that is our model. And that's where we can draw our strength from. If someone harms you, turn your cheek, give them your cloak. Don't return evil for evil, but return good for evil. When the world wants to put you down and tell you you're not worth anything, don't return that to them. Don't believe it, and don't return it. Return acceptance. Return the fact that we are all made special, unique, and irreplaceable. Even if you're sitting here going, well, I don't believe in this image, this likeness of God, just think for a second about how you are here today. That unique collection of DNA, of molecules that make up who you are. Not just that, but then all the experiences, all the people that have come in contact with you. Every time we come in contact with someone, we are changed. We are in some way changed. So even if somebody made the most perfect replica of you, it's not you. You have never existed, and you will never exist again. We'll exist forever. But there's not going to be another you. There's not going to be another Bill, another Sally. They are special, unique, and irreplaceable. When we realize that, and then we come to the point in Dr. Enright's definition where we give a gift. It's those smiles, it's those cards, it's those in memory. I spent time working on forgiving my father. It didn't come easy. When you do, when the guy says, I don't remember anything. But what did we end up bonding over? Well, found out we both love football. We're both alcoholics. So we had some great talks about staying sober. And by the grace of God, he was sober for many years before he passed. And by the grace of God, I've been sober for over 30 years. But what a difference when I was able to be there when he passed, when he drew his last breath. That I didn't have the bitterness, the resentment, and the anger that I had lived with, that I had fostered, that I had harbored for 20 years. But that through forgiveness, I was able to let that go. And what a blessed morning that was. Your life, as you can tell, we're done with the slides. You're just threw them out the window. Um, there's so much more to your life. Oh my gosh. I look around this room and I think about the opportunities that are there to change the course of your families, to put an end to the generational bitterness, to invite and start to love Uncle Bill and heal your families, to pass down a legacy of love and forgiveness, and to do away with the legacy of bitterness and resentment and the fact that, yeah, they hurt me, therefore I'm never going to forgive them. You have the opportunity, you have the time to forgive. Everything that I've taught is covered in Dr. Enright's books. Everything I've taught is also covered in 6 to 8 week course, a little more in depth. But I want to leave you with steps if you're like, okay, that's kind of overwhelming. What can I do right now, Tim? Okay, you leave today. Here's some things you can do. Number 1, shut up. Stop talking about other people. Stop taking part in those coffee pot conversations about how horrible Betsy is. Again, sorry, Betsy. Stop. The other thing you can do is start to realize that forgiveness and love and mercy are possible. So many times we start our days, and what we find in the world is what we expect to find in the world. This is going to be a horrible day. My body's acting up, my car's acting up, my life's acting up, everything's acting up, my cable's out. It's going to be a horrible day. That's what we find. People are mean, people are vengeful, people are horrible. We're going to find mean, vengeful people out there. What if we started to look for love? What if we started to look for examples of mercy? When I look at forgiveness, I think back to the nickel mines disaster with the Amish community, when Charles Roberts went into his schoolhouse. I think about Emmanuel Baptist Church in Charleston and how both of those communities responded with forgiveness. Much to the dismay of the world around them, much to the confusion of the media. What? Why? Because they have been taught to live forgiveness. Look for love, look for mercy, look for examples of forgiveness. Start to believe in love, mercy, and forgiveness. Start to look for them, and then start in small ways to act them out. Not in big ways. Don't hit the boulder first, but start by the little pebbles that are around you. Start to live out mercy, forgiveness, and love. And then you'll start to prepare your brain, as Romans 12 tells us. It's transform. We can transform our minds. God can transform our brain. We don't have to think like the world tells us to think. We have a choice. We have a Savior. And so by doing those things, you open up the possibility of forgiveness, so that when you start to do the hard work of forgiveness and rehumanizing that person, there's a much better chance it's going to work. So there are things you can do to prepare to forgive. But I'm over time. And so I want to stop because I do want to see if we can have 10 minutes worth of dialogue, of questions, of answers, of sharing. This has just been my journey. Forgiveness is part of my journey, and it's what I'm trying to live. And so my dad did pass away a couple years ago. My brother passed away 3 years ago. There was no reconciliation going on in that relationship. We shared lives, we shared families we never talked about growing up. I have no idea what he remembers, what he doesn't remember. But it's still a struggle to forgive him. But I'm working on it. And that's what God asks us to do. Work for the good. Work toward the good. Turn your back on evil and walk toward the good. And that's what forgiveness does. Hopefully I've been able to encourage, share, empower in some way your journey of forgiveness. So I'm going to shut up and give you guys a chance to talk or ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm. I agree with that phrase. I don't think we should forget that people have hurt us. I don't want to forget that the last time that I was with this person, that they were horribly cruel to me. So yeah, I believe in forgive and not forget. But it's certainly not, you can't forgive and continue to hold it against them. And I think back to the biblical model where my sins are removed, is God doesn't hold them against me. He sees me in a new way. So just because I forgive doesn't mean that I give the person a clean slate to start over. One of the first studies that Dr. Enright did was with incest survivors. They'll never be able to forget the trauma that was inflicted on them. But through forgiveness, they were able to reclaim a relationship. There are some of those women that went through forgiveness and they started to care for their dads as their dads grew older. They never forgot, but they were able to forgive. It's not a matter of forgetting, it's a matter of accepting. And what are we going to do with it? Yes? You're going to have to ask God. If I had an answer for every question that I had in the Bible, I would be rich, for one. But I believe we can. We don't have to forgive. We don't have to accept forgiveness. When Christ offers us forgiveness, we can thumb our nose at him. So part of my, this is where we start to talk about stuff that gets me not invited back to different churches. But I think of C.S. Lewis, and I think of his Narnia Chronicles. And I think about how he had this picture of people that were in paradise at the end book, but they were so focused on their bitterness and their pain and their anger and their evilness that they didn't see the world around them. And so it was a gift offered to them, and all they had to do was walk out of their tent and accept it. But they want to no part in it. If we don't want to be forgiven, then we're going to run away from God. If we don't, and what gets dangerous is when we don't think we can be forgiven. Oh my gosh. I've been in that dangerous place. So what if that other thief on the cross was just sitting there going, there's no way. I can't be forgiven. I've done such horrible things. And you could just see Jesus on the cross begging him, go, no, I can forgive you. No, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. I've argued that with God. And he's come back and said, really? You got the power cross on one side, and you got your beliefs on the other, Tim. Which do you really think is more powerful? Some days it seems to be my beliefs. He offers it, and we don't have to accept it. Doesn't mean he doesn't love us. Continues to love us. Continues to offer forgiveness to us. Maybe this is why I don't have an MDiv, but that's my answer. And I welcome thoughts on both of these. I'm not a definitive answer type, okay? So I would love to, if other people have thoughts on forgive and don't forget. If people have thoughts on the second thief, I'd love to hear them. Please, I'm not.
This is what Tim has said.
No, please, no. Oh my gosh, it'd be horrible. Yes. And this is, you're only allowed to. So I started out thinking that there was this intersection, and I haven't stopped thinking that because of the fact that when I have the privilege to interact with families who have children with special health care needs. Everybody has the opportunity to be heard, right? The families that I deal with, it seems they have more opportunities to be heard. Is they have family that don't accept their child. They have society that thinks they should just be better disciplinarians. They have doctors who maybe ignored them. These families with special health care needs have had the ability to have a record of resentments. And so then they get to a point where it's hard to trust anyone. And they feel very isolated. And so part of what we do at the Wasteman Center is we try to figure out, okay, what does support mean to this parent? You know, we obviously can't, talk to them too much about forgiveness and the power of God. But we talk to them about what does support look like? How can they get rid of some of their anger? We talk about healthy styles. Because part of it comes back to is that space when we're poked. Okay, so someone walks up, maybe they remind us of somebody or they are that person. And just their appearance or maybe the sound, anybody have anybody who's just their voice grates on them, and hopefully it's not your spouse? But you just have that moment. What do I do? Well, you're not going to do anything if you don't become aware of that moment. And so I talk to families about being aware of how are they going into IEP meetings. Are they going in ready to fight? Are they going in believing that that teacher cares about their child? That space where we have the opportunity to react or just continue on without thinking about it. It's hard to stop ourselves in that space. But I try to talk to them about, it's going into the IEP meetings, going into the doctor's offices, dealing with the recreation department that has never heard about adaptive sports. Okay, are you going to go in there angry? Or are you going to go in there with the spirit of teaching? Not just for your child, but for the children that will follow yours. Some parents are ready to do that. Some parents aren't. Take them where they're at. Very welcome. Thank you so much for... It is a privilege to be able to talk about what God's doing in my life. Every time I do, it helps me. So no matter how well I enjoy the chili and any other gifts that I may receive from this, part of it is very selfish. That if we don't talk about what we believe, actually let me put it in a more positive way. When we talk about what we believe, we reinforce what we believe. When we start to live out what we believe, we reinforce what we believe. We can't believe in secret. I can't believe in forgiveness without living out forgiveness. And that's one of the struggles with me, is believing that I've been forgiven because of a whole past issues. But I've come to the point where if I don't believe in forgiveness for myself, what am I doing offering it to other people? It'd be a sham. And so it's challenged me to accept that forgiveness. So this has been another opportunity for that, and I just really appreciate it. And if there's any way for me to come back up and spend a few weeks delving a little bit deeper into this stuff, I would love to be able to do that, because I love this topic. So thanks, Paul, for inviting me. Brothers hug.
I will do that too.